greater visibility equals more funding. And being invisible is not an option because there's someone else that has a similar cause and they're doing it so well that they're going further faster.
Welcome to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange, a podcast from IPM Advancement. We believe strong nonprofits can change the world, and at IPM, our job is to make sure your organization is one of them. With each episode, our goal is to bring you insightful conversations with thought leaders from across the nonprofit sector. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello, listeners. I'm your host, Russ. Today, we'll be talking about the value of being visible to your supporters. I think a lot of us have been there. Your nonprofit is doing good work, but it's not getting noticed. Or your approach to communications has slipped a bit and you're kind of winging it. Well, my hope is that this episode will highlight why it's so important to have a smart and consistent advancement communication strategy. Joining me today is Jenn DeBarge Goonan, social impact cheerleader, founder of JAG Communications, and author of The Greatest Good on Substack, which spotlights changemakers, mission-driven brands, and high-impact nonprofits. Jenn is here to make the case that in a crowded landscape, being invisible can cost you. We'll discuss practical tips on how to become visible in the places that really matter, including Jenn's 5-part checklist to make sure your organization stays top of mind with funders, corporate partners, donors, and your community. And we'll also cover some of the more philosophical aspects of communications. Welcome, Jenn DeBarge Goonan, to the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I am super excited to have you here. So, Jenn, from your perspective in the work that you do, what's the most pressing challenge facing nonprofit fundraisers and leaders right now? And why is this challenge so critical to address?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm coming from the point of that visibility is really critical. And I know that nonprofits, it's all about giving and paying it forward to greater society. But ultimately, nonprofits are a business. So you have to look at it that way. And just as if you were running a business, you need to be visible. It's the same as running a nonprofit or being a part of the nonprofit ecosystem. It's really important from a funding standpoint, from thought leadership, from AI credibility and being searchable. So there's so many different implications if you're not being visible.
So Jenn, what do you think in terms of, knowing that our audiences that we need to get out to are just completely overwhelmed right now? There's just so much to have to process during the day. There's so many inputs. How do you think we make sure that folks are able to receive the messages that we're putting out there to folks?
Yeah.
And you talk about a little bit about the visibility gap. Let's talk about that.
Sure. Yeah, it's so crucial because ultimately donors are a couple different segments. It could be corporate donors. It could be just, the general public and what have you.
Yeah.
And the need to have consistent communication that's clear is really important. And let me give you an example.
Yeah.
I was speaking to an executive director the end of last year, and she was beside herself because her organization missed out on a $50,000 grant. It was a reoccurring grant. She thought that she was going to get it. She put it apart. It was a part of her budget, but unfortunately, she didn't get it. When she reached back to the funder, she asked, why?
Yeah.
And she said that they were very quiet on their online spaces, social media, and that signaled distress. And that distress left them the party.
Interesting.
And so she was so in deep with a project from an operations side that she lost sight from a communication perspective. Nevertheless, she learned her lesson. And now she wonders, was it just $50,000? Was it more than that?
Yeah.
But all she can do is move forward. So it's a good lesson for all of us. You're being watched all the time.
Yeah.
Your donors are potential donors. So it's important to not only have your house in order for your current audience, but potentially future donors as well.
Yeah. And I think in a recent conversation we had on this podcast, we talked about the importance of organizations kind of finding that line between really touting themselves too much and making sure that they're still kind of portraying their funders and donors as the heroes, right? They're the people who are making things happen for beneficiaries. Mm-hmm. And you don't want to cross that line into making the organization too much of the hero, right? But it's what you're saying is it's important that like you don't go so far into the background that it looks like the lights are off.
That's correct. And also too, I think there's a right and wrong way to do the communication so that it doesn't look self-serving and it doesn't look like the nonprofit is the hero. Quite honestly, I think the best approach is putting a spotlight on the storytelling through the impacts and the beneficiaries of that. So if you have students that are benefiting, if that's through like better communication skills or workforce development skills, highlight that.
Yeah.
Let them tell their story because ultimately testimonials and a third-party credibility is your best way to showcase your worth and your impact.
Yeah, it is always better to hear somebody else kind of make the case for your organization.
Right.
You're going to tell your story in your way as someone who gets a paycheck from the organization. That's received in a certain way from your audience. When someone is a beneficiary or someone is a donor who's affiliated with your organization voluntarily or is receiving a benefit from your organization, that's a completely different perspective, right? When they're offering up kudos to your organization and then they share that with your audience, that's a much different perspective that you want audiences to hear.
I couldn't agree more. And oftentimes with my clients, we do articles that are put on their website. And then that article is leveraged not only on the website, but on social media from a thought leadership perspective for company newsletters. Yeah. And those little nuggets of information can be used throughout the whole year. They tell a story from different perspectives that they're just treasure troves of wisdom that really puts a great spotlight on the organization.
Yeah, and for our fundraisers out there, remember that these are all things that you do want to keep in kind of a repository. You want to use these because once a year you can use them in your annual reports. You can use them in your donor impact reports. They can kind of be gathered up and used because if people miss them during the year, if you have a group of maybe older donors who might not be on social media, you can put them in print and you can put them in kind of the more traditional communications vehicles that you can share with people.
I think, Russ, you bring up a really good point is that as a communicator, it's really important to talk to the different stakeholders within your ecosystem and ask them, how do they get their information? How do they like to receive it? Because that way you can build a plan and reverse engineer it to understand where that information's going. So it's hitting the right people at the right time.
Yeah. And it's always good to get their perspective. Don't make assumptions. Get the hard data on how people want to be communicated with.
I agree. Because what organization A could be very much different than organization B.
Yep. And when you move from one organization to another as an employee, don't just assume that what worked at your old organization is going to translate to the place that you're at now.
Totally agree.
So in light of these challenges, what do you see as the biggest opportunity for nonprofits to kind of grow and improve?
So my strategy for working with multi-billion-dollar companies to small nonprofits is the same strategy, and it's called the North Star Message Guide. And it's really a clear messaging strategy. It's really a fancy word of just having all your information in one place. And quite honestly, it saves hundreds of hours per year for nonprofits, especially if your team is small and mighty. And basically, it's why are you in business, or why are you serving? Who's your audience? Testimonials, like the third-party validation. And then when I'm working with nonprofits, I always ask key people in their ecosystem. So like talking to Bob in operations, who you think may not have the best, feedback, it could be your a treasure trove of information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Challenges and opportunities.
Yeah.
I talk to the donors. I talk to everyone, like 5 or 6 people in the ecosystem. Some have the same questions, and some is, what's your wish for the organization? What could be done better?
Yeah.
What are the missed opportunities? And oftentimes there's a thread that will happen where you're like, oh, 3 people have said the same thing, but my direct client may have missed that, right? And this is a really good time to communicate that information, because otherwise they may not have that information. Oftentimes that information helps build campaigns, fundraising campaigns that may have been missed because they just didn't know or didn't have to take the time to uncover it.
Yeah, I think when you're working in an organization, a lot of times you can develop blinders. And there are things that are so obvious to other people, especially if you're in a leadership role. You can get into kind of that C-suite mentality where you have people around you and they're all kind of agreeing on things, and your conversations may be a little bit more limited. And so it's great to have those opportunities to kind of widen your perspectives, bring in other people, and be willing to be challenged, be willing to be wrong. Like, don't be so hard-edged and don't be so concrete, because especially nowadays, we have to pivot, especially in leadership roles for nonprofits, because we know that boards are more demanding than ever. They expect results. And if things aren't working, the boards will call you out and you'll be gone. And so you need to be able to pivot very quickly.
And also, too, when you have a leader that's open to that, there's usually a really high success rate.
Yeah.
Because then they're open to listening to the good, bad, and ugly, and help you grow really efficiently and as smooth as possible, right? Because every road is a little bit bumpy or windy. But once they're open to those kind of challenging questions or those answers you get, they may not feel great in the beginning, but if you can work through those and then build from that, sky's the limit. And quite honestly, those are the organizations that go further faster because they have all the answers. And as the old saying goes, knowledge is power is really true in this case.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just good leadership, right? If you can model that as a leader, your staff is going to see that. And they're going to see that it's okay to be willing to challenge ideas within the team. And those are the kind of things that really make an organization strong. That flexibility, right? You think of like a palm tree in a hurricane,
right?
And it was meant to sway and it was meant to move, and that is the reason it survives the wind.
Yeah, that's a great point. Also, too, it builds culture and morale.
Yeah.
And if your organization is small and mighty, maybe you have a staff of 10, make those 10 people be the greatest cheerleaders for your organization.
Yeah.
It has a ripple effect and it compounds impact. And it really kind of showcases the goodwill within the community and the audience it serves.
Jenn, have you ever been in situations where you've worked with a client and you've seen that kind of aha moment where you've gone in and at first, maybe they were expecting different results and you spoke with people and, they kind of illuminated some things that maybe leadership wasn't expecting. Any examples of that?
Oh, yes. I have a great one. I have a client who he is really adamant in going on to events around the country, and he wants to talk to the students, which is their beneficiary. And he always asks a question, is there anything I can be doing better? Is there anything the organization can be doing better? And because of that, you troubleshoot issues way quicker. If you have that conversation in January versus in August, that's 8 months of it could have just been overblown or gotten bigger unnecessarily.
Yeah.
So having those conversations and being authentic and then saying, all right, I don't have the solution for you right now, but we're going to work towards this. It only makes the programming better. And I think the whole ecosystem benefits from it.
That's actually a great segue. What do you think is a hard truth that nonprofit professionals need to face if they want to improve their communications and fundraising?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I look at visibility and communications for each organization as a spectrum. And it varies. Some are very sophisticated and some are not.
Yeah.
And it's okay if you're not, because, there's time constraints on so many things that need to get done during the day. But I will leave you with this, is that greater visibility equals more funding.
Yeah.
And being invisible is not an option because there's someone else that has a similar cause and they're doing it so well that they're going further faster. So, and oftentimes I talk to nonprofit leaders and they themselves do not want to be put on LinkedIn. They just don't want to be. So I kind of hold their hand and walk through it.
Yeah.
And those first couple steps up cringe mountain are awkward. But the more you do it and more you work that muscle, the more they see the connections that are happening. People go into their DMs and say, hey, can we have a conversation?
Yeah.
And those could be really valuable strategic conversations and partnerships that really sometimes don't cost anything, but that can really amplify a nonprofit's mission. So I encourage you, even if you're scared and you do not want to do it because you don't think you have quote unquote time, I would encourage you to make time and work with someone on your team or externally that can walk you through the steps on how to get your organization and yourself, right?
Yeah.
Because you are a thought leader, more visible.
How do you balance that visibility of a leader? So someone, say, in an executive director role or a president, CEO role, how do you balance their visibility with the visibility of the organization?
Mm-hmm.
If they leave the organization and donors only know them as the main face of the organization,
Mm-hmm.
that's a risk for fundraising.
Well,
So how do you kind of balance all of that?
Yep. So to answer your first question, I think that what the main channels of like the social channels of an organization is going to be much different than like the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
I always look at the CEO that's going to peel back a little bit more layers and maybe give you more of the inside scoop of conversations that are happening that affect the industry or the cause or the mission. Things that no one else would know because they're in their rooms.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give everything away. It could be just that I had an exciting meeting with X person. It signals to others that you're having conversations that really matter.
Yeah.
And to your second question, if there's only one person touting the thought leadership in an organization, it's a tricky spot to be.
Sure.
Some people just because of egos, I have to say, sometimes it's only one person. But however, nonprofits that have different people talking. So if it's one in development or programming or operations, giving their kind of unique perspective, it only buoys the whole organization because then maybe operation people from other organizations or the industry might gain information and it only helps the whole ecosystem rise.
Absolutely. And what we've found messaging wise is once we start to broaden that kind of internal storytelling, sharing the behind the scenes look of an organization and what's happening with donors, that gets donors excited because they might not identify, right? Like when we send out communications, especially fundraising communications, I think there is a certain element of people reading that information and wanting to personally feel connected with the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And if they don't feel connected with that one voice that they keep seeing over and over again, it's important that we try others.
People jive with different personalities, right? Or different information or, type of writing too. And I always say, like, in my world, and this is just personal preference, is that I like to look at a year, the whole year. But also, too, it's almost impossible. Like a lot of things happen in 12 months, right?
Sure.
So I like building mini plans, like 90-day plans, where you can 80% do what it's tried and true. And then that 20% you can try new things.
Yeah.
And then after the 90 days, go back and say, hey, how did that land? Did it land really well?
Yeah.
If not, then scrap it. And if it did, like move on and maybe build upon it so that you're always constantly elevating your communications in new ways and testing it. There's, people are evolving and changing each day. There's new people that are coming into your sphere. So it's really important that you keep things fresh, but also you keep the storytelling that impacts at the heart of everything.
So if you could give listeners a piece of lasting advice to help them improve their communications, what would it be and how can they get started on it right away?
Yep. I have a checklist of 5. I call them the Fad 5.
Okay.
One is your online presence. I would encourage anyone in the organization is to search your organization in AI, in Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude. And If you can do a simple search and the results do not come back as you want them, you know that you have communication issues. And I would say most nonprofits and businesses do. And I would just look at that as a signal that things need to be strengthened. The second thing is ongoing media attention. Again, with AI, media placements are a huge signal that verifies that organization is doing the things that they're saying they're doing. And that could be industry, local media, national media attention, thought leadership, as we just talked about. It's not just only your CEO, but it's your people with different voices. And it just doesn't have to be C-suite. I want to enforce that too, because your donors or someone such as like someone in your student advisory board could be really important to lift that voice from their perspective.
Yeah.
Another thing too, which, people are like, oh, I understand this, but really that social media piece, you don't have to recreate the wheel. Take your news articles or your newsletters and then kind of cut them up in different bite sizes that you can utilize across a month or a couple months. And then one of the best ways to strengthen your organization is strategic partnerships. Usually they don't cost a lot of money or nothing at all, but there could be coalitions or alliances or organizations that are connected to you that maybe want to work with you. And so I would encourage you to reach out and see if you could connect and see if somehow you can work together. Another thing that's really powerful is that if organization A and B start talking to each other, right, and then start lifting their voices up on their social channels and website, that's another great signal to AI and SEO that your nonprofit is not only visible, but it's also credible.
Excellent. So we will take that checklist and put it in our show notes for everybody. But again, it's online presence, ongoing media attention, thought leadership, consistent social media, and ecosystem partnerships.
That's correct.
Excellent. So going back to that example we had earlier of the executive director who lost that recurring $50,000 in funding, if you have someone in an organization who runs up against some internal kind of resistance of investing in communication strategy, or just basically, maybe you have an organization that just is resource limited and they might not have lost that money yet, but it's a very real risk and it's a possibility, right, for everybody. How would you help that person and advise them to be able to effectively make the case to their superiors, their board, maybe if they're in a leadership position, or if they're in a lower position, maybe they're president or CEO or executive director?
Yeah, great question. I would do 2 stress tests. One, have them simply go online and go to AI or just into Google and start doing simple terms, how you think that someone would search your organization. And once you press search, and if it doesn't come back how you want it to, you have some issues that you need to work on from a communication standpoint.
Like in a visibility problem. That signals a visibility issue.
Yeah, because there you have it. Like it's so black and white.
Yeah.
The second thing is ask 3 people connected to your organization, what do you do? What is your mission? How do you make lives better? And if you get 3 separate different answers, you know that you have a communication issue.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I love that.
I think truly, if people are talking about your organization in different ways, it really should sound very similar for each one, for A, B, and C.
Yeah.
And so if your internal communications folks and just like your internal staff don't have a consistent way of talking about your mission and your organization, that has to be job number 1.
Yeah. Like, tell me, you work here. Tell me what you think we do.
Yeah. And how would you say this to a friend?
Right.
I work at X and this is what we do.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. If they're stumbling or they're what have you, like, okay, that's knowledge is power. And that just signals that there's an issue that needs to be worked upon. Because quite honestly, if you have 10 people on your staff, those 10 people should be your biggest cheerleaders and should be able to communicate clearly about what you do and how you change the world and how to join our cause.
I'm going to say it already. This is my favorite takeaway from our conversation. I love this one.
Oh, good.
This is, I'm latching onto this and this is my baby. Okay. So what gives you hope about the future of fundraising and philanthropy? And it's particularly kind of in the context of what we've talked about today, which is very communication specific.
Yeah, that's interesting because I just ended my 14th conversation with a nonprofit this week. And I would say 98% of them, there's so much hope around it. But I would say in that 98%, there's a huge gap about when you ask them, how can others help them? Like, how can you go further faster? Oftentimes it's like, they can just go to my social channels or they can go to my website. And that's such a big miss.
Yeah.
And because people do want to help. There's a stat that I just read that 57 million Americans are looking for hope and they're looking for ways to help. And so there's a ripe audience that are looking to help your organization. And so I would just encourage everyone to take the time to communicate clearly and make the ask. People want to help you. So give them a couple ways to do that. And oftentimes I like using the social math approach. If $10,000 is going to help you go further faster, but what are you looking for from that 10,000? Is that going to help you help more kids with cancer or cancer research or students with robotics? Whatever that cause is or that mission, reverse engineer it so they can easily visually see that when they give, they can see what the impact will have in someone's life.
Speaking of impact, you author a Substack called The Greater Good, and it shares stories of nonprofits and other purpose-driven individuals and organizations. And before we wrap up, can you just share a little bit about what that Substack is about and what inspired you to launch it?
Yes. What inspired me was I was just like we were talking about is that nonprofits, there's this gap, this communication gap of asking for the clear help.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? I've been thinking for a while. I'm a former journalist. I love to write. I write every single day. And I thought, you know what? This is going to be how I'm going to show up in the world and pay it forward. And so I'm interviewing nonprofits, change makers, and purpose-driven leaders about why they're in business or why they have their cause, why it matters, that stat that brings everything together in 2 to 3 ways that other people can help them go further faster with clear ways to engage. So it's a nice place to get educated, inspired, and to encourage people to help.
I love it. Well, we will also put a link to that in the show notes. But just overall, Jenn, this whole conversation was fantastic. If listeners want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way for them to find you and for them to reach out?
They can reach out to me through my website, which is JAG-communications, or LinkedIn via Jenn DeBarge Goonan.
Jenn DeBarge Goonan, communications and social impact expert and founder of JAG Communications. Thank you so much for joining me today. As always, thanks also to our producer, Curtis Schmidt, and thanks to you, NPFX listeners, for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange.
That concludes this episode of the Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange. If you'd like to learn more about any of today's guests or resources, we'll include links in the show notes. If you like our podcast, please help spread the word. First, subscribe in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite app so you always know when a new episode is released. Second, forward episodes you like to friends and colleagues or post them on social media. Word of mouth is one of the best ways you can help share these conversations with more nonprofit professionals like yourself. And if you use Apple Podcasts or Audible, please leave us a review. Positive reviews are how many listeners find us, and they also help us understand what you like most about NPFX. Finally, we'd love to hear your suggestions. If there's a challenge you're facing, a question you have, or a voice you think the nonprofit sector needs to hear, send an email with the subject heading NPFX suggestion to contact@ipmadvancement.com. The Nonprofit Fundraising Exchange is just that, an exchange, and we're grateful that you're part of it. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.